Right now, America's national debt just hit $36 trillion. Let me say that again, $36 trillion. That's more money than the entire economy produces in a year, way more. And yet, somehow, everything's still running. Your paycheck still hits your account, stores are still open, the lights are still on. But here's the kicker. Every single economist worth their salt has been screaming the same thing for years. This can't last. It shouldn't last. By all the rules we know, the whole thing should have collapsed by now. So why hasn't it? That's the billion-dollar question. Actually, scratch that. It's the $36 trillion question. And the answer? It's going to blow your mind. See, three massive secrets are keeping this economy from going belly up. Three things the average American has no clue about. And when I show you what they are, you're going to see the entire financial system in a whole new light. First, there's a trick the government's been pulling that's straight up genius. Or insane. Maybe both. Second, there's a global game being played that puts the U.S. in a position nobody else can touch. It's like having a cheat code for the world economy. And third, there's a ticking time bomb hidden in plain sight that could change everything overnight. But the truth behind all this? It'll shock you. Most people think the economy runs on hard work and smart decisions. Nope, it runs on something way more fragile, way more dangerous. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let me show you exactly how this happened. Okay, let's back up for a second. If you've been paying attention at all, you've probably noticed things feel off. Gas prices are wild, groceries cost an arm and a leg, rent? Don't even get me started. Your parents bought a house for like 50 grand back in the day. Now that same house goes for $500,000, easy. And yet the news keeps saying the economy's doing fine. Unemployment's low, the stock market's hitting record highs. So what gives? Here's the deal. The American economy is running on what I call borrowed time, literally. See, back in the day, the US dollar was backed by gold, real, actual gold sitting in a vault somewhere. If you had a $100 bill, that meant there was $100 worth of gold backing it up. Made sense, right? But in 1971, President Nixon pulled the plug on that system. He said, nah, we don't need gold anymore. And just like that, the dollar became what's called a fiat currency. Fancy term that basically means it's only worth something because the government says so. No gold, no silver, just trust. And that trust has been tested like crazy over the past 50 years. Fast forward to today. The government's been spending money like there's no tomorrow. Wars, stimulus checks, bailouts, infrastructure and healthcare, you name it, they're throwing cash at it. The problem is they don't actually have that cash. So what do? They borrow it. From who? Well, mostly from other countries. China, Japan, and even regular Americans invest in things like treasury bonds. And here's the wild part. The national debt has gone from about $1 trillion in the 1980s to $36 trillion today. That's not a typo. $36 trillion. To put that in perspective, if you spent $1 million every single day, it would take you over 98,000 years to spend $36 trillion. Yeah, wrap your head around that. Now, common sense says this is a disaster waiting to happen. If you or I racked up that kind of debt, we'd be screwed, bankrupt, done. But the U.S.? Still standing, still the biggest economy on the planet. How? That's where things get really interesting. Now here's where things get really interesting. All right, here's the first big secret. The U.S. dollar isn't just any currency, it's the currency. Let me explain. When countries trade with each other, they don't use their own money. They use U.S. dollars. You got oil from Saudi Arabia? Paid in dollars. Electronics from China? Dollars. Coffee from Brazil? You guessed it, dollars. This is called the global reserve currency, and the U.S. has had that title locked down since World War II. Why does this matter? Because it means every country on Earth needs dollars. Not wants, needs. Think about it. If you're Japan and you want to buy oil from the Middle East, you can't just hand over yen. Nope, you got to convert that yen into U.S. dollars first. Same with Europe, same with China, same with everybody. So what happens? Countries stockpile dollars. They hold billions, sometimes trillions, just sitting in reserves. And where do those dollars come from? The United States. This creates insane demand for the dollar, and when demand's high, the value stays strong. But here's the genius part, the trick that keeps the whole system running. The U.S. government can print more dollars whenever it wants. I'm not even exaggerating. The Federal Reserve, which is basically the country's central bank, has the power to create money out of thin air. They call it quantitative easing, fancy term for turning on the money printer. During the 2008 financial crisis, printed trillions. COVID pandemic, printed even more trillions. And because the whole world needs dollars, they can get away with it. Has any other country tried that? Inflation goes through the roof, currency collapses, the economy tanks. But the U.S. still chugging along. And that's because of this global reserve status. It's a cheat code. But here's the thing nobody's talking about. This system only works as long as everyone agrees to keep using the dollar. The second countries start ditching the dollar for something else, game over. And guess what? That's already starting to happen. China and Russia have been making deals in their own currencies, skipping the dollar altogether. India is doing it too. Even some Middle Eastern countries are flirting with the idea. If that trend picks up steam, the whole house of cards could come crashing down. But if you think that's crazy, wait until you hear this. Okay, so we've covered the dollar's global dominance, but there's another layer to this, another reason the economy hasn't collapsed yet, and it's all about debt. Now I know what you're thinking. Wait, didn't you just say debt is the problem? Yeah, but here's the twist. Debt is also the solution. I know that sounds backwards. Stick with me. See, the way the U.S. handles its debt is completely different from how you or I would. When you take out a loan, you got to pay it back with interest, and if you don't, you're in deep trouble. But the government, they don't really pay it back. Instead, they do something called rolling over the debt. Here's how it works. Let's say the government borrowed $1 billion 10 years ago. That loan's about to come due. Time to pay up, right? Nope. They just borrow another $1 billion to pay off the first $1 billion. And then when that loan comes due, they borrow again. It's like using one credit card to pay off another credit card, forever. Sounds insane, right? And it kinda is. But here's why it works for the government. As long as people keep lending the money, they can keep this going indefinitely. And people do keep lending, because U.S. Treasury bonds are considered the safest investment on the planet. Safer than stocks, safer than real estate, safer than anything. Why? Because the U.S. has never, ever defaulted on its debt. Never missed a payment, not once in over 200 years. So investors, countries, pension funds, they all buy treasury bonds like crazy. And that gives the government a constant stream of cash to keep rolling over the debt. But wait, there's more. Here's the really wild part. The Federal Reserve, that central bank I mentioned earlier, is actually one of the biggest buyers of U.S. debt. Yeah, the government is borrowing money from itself. Let that sink in. The Treasury issues bonds. The Fed buys them with money it literally creates out of nowhere. It's like if you wrote yourself a check, deposited it in your own bank account, and then used that money to pay your bills. Except when the government does it, it's called monetary policy. Now, you might be thinking, that can't be legal. Oh, it's legal, totally legal, and it's been happening for decades. In fact, the Fed owns trillions of dollars in government debt right now. So why doesn't this cause the economy to explode? Two reasons. First, like I said earlier, the demand for dollars is global, so the extra money gets absorbed worldwide. Second, and this is key, the economy keeps growing. As long as the economy grows, the debt becomes less of a problem. Think of it like this. If you make 50 grand a year and you owe 10 grand, that's a decent chunk of your income. But if you start making 100 grand a year, that same 10 grand debt, not as big a deal anymore. The same logic applies to the national debt. The U.S. economy is massive, the biggest in the world, about $28 trillion in GDP. So even though the debt's at $36 trillion, the economy's still big enough to handle it. For now. But here's the catch. Growth is slowing down. Used to be the economy would grow 3, 4, even 5% a year. Now, we're lucky to hit 2%. And if growth stalls out completely
or worse, goes negative, then the debt becomes a real problem, fast. And that brings us to the third secret, the one nobody wants to talk about. Oh, and before we get there, if you want to understand how the government's been hiding the real state of the economy, check out our video. Here's how the most viral, shocking truth about America's economy was hidden. You can find the link in the info button above. Trust me, it connects all the dots. All right, back to the biggest revelation. This brings us to the most shocking discovery of all. Here it is, the big one. The real reason the economy hasn't collapsed. It's not just the dollar's dominance. It's not just the debt game. It's something way more fragile. Confidence. Yeah, that's it. The whole thing runs on confidence. Let me break it down. Money, at the end of the day, is just paper, or nowadays, just numbers on a screen. It has no real value. A $100 bill, it's worth $100 because everyone agrees it's worth $100. The second people stop believing in it, it's just paper. The same goes for the economy. The stock market keeps going up because people believe it'll keep going up. Banks stay solvent because people believe their money's safe. The government keeps borrowing because people believe they'll get paid back. It's all built on trust, on confidence. And as long as that confidence holds, the system works. But the second that confidence cracks, everything falls apart. We've seen it happen before. The Great Depression started with a loss of confidence in the stock market. The 2008 financial crisis, loss of confidence in the housing market and the banks. Every major economic collapse in history has been triggered by a sudden loss of confidence. And right now, that confidence is hanging by a thread. Here's why. People are starting to notice things don't add up. Inflation's eating away at their paychecks. Housing is unaffordable. Student debt's crushing an entire generation. Meanwhile, billionaires are getting richer. The stock market's hitting all-time highs. There's a disconnect, a big one. And when people feel like the systems are rigged against them, they start losing faith. You see it in the rise of alternative currencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum. People are looking for something outside the traditional system. You see it in the distrust of banks. More people are pulling their money out, keeping cash at home. You see it in the political chaos. People voting for outsiders, populists, anyone who promises to shake things up. All of these are signs that confidence is eroding. And here's the scary part. If enough people lose faith at the same time, it creates a domino effect. One bank fails, people panic. They pull their money out of other banks. More banks fail. Stock market crashes, people sell everything, prices plummet. The government tries to step in, but nobody trusts them anymore. Bonds tank, dollar crashes, and just like that, the whole thing collapses. It's called a crisis of confidence, and it can happen faster than you think. In 2008, Lehman Brothers was a giant bank, one of the biggest in the world. Then, in a matter of days, it was gone, bankrupt, and it almost took the entire financial system down with it. The only reason it didn't? The government stepped in. Massive bailouts, printed trillions of dollars, and most importantly, they restored confidence. They convinced people that the system was safe, that their money was protected. And it worked, barely. But here's the thing. Every time they do that, they use up a little more trust. Every bailout, every trillion printed, every crisis was narrowly avoided. It chips away at people's confidence, and eventually there won't be any left. So the real question isn't why hasn't the economy collapsed yet? The real question is how much longer can this confidence hold? Because once it's gone, there's no getting it back. And that's the ticking time bomb I mentioned at the start. So what does all this mean for us today? All right, let's bring this back down to earth. What does all this actually mean for you and me? First off, understand this. The system's not going to collapse tomorrow. Despite all the red flags, all the debt, all the craziness, it's designed to keep going. The people in charge have every incentive to keep it running. Politicians, bankers, the wealthy elite, they'll do whatever it takes to keep the lights on. More stimulus, more bailouts, more printed money. But that doesn't mean you should just sit back and relax. because even if the system doesn't collapse completely, things are going to get rough. Inflation's not going anywhere. In fact, it's probably going to get worse. Your money's going to buy less and less every year. That raise you got at work, it's not keeping up with the rising cost of everything else. Housing is going to stay expensive, maybe even get worse. More people are priced out of home ownership. More folks are stuck renting forever. Student debt, still a nightmare. Jobs that used to pay well, not keeping up with the cost of living. So what can you do? Here's the real talk. 1. Educate yourself. Know how money actually works. Understand inflation, interest rates, and the stock market. The more you know, the better decisions you can make. 2. Diversify. Don't keep all your eggs in one basket. Got savings? Don't just leave it sitting in a bank account earning 0 interest while inflation eats it alive. Invest. Stocks, real estate, maybe even some alternative assets like crypto. I'm not saying go all in on Bitcoin, but having some exposure to different asset classes can protect you. 3. Build skills. In an unstable economy, the best thing you can have is the ability to earn. Learn something valuable, something people will pay for no matter what's happening in the world. Tech skills, trade skills, creative skills. Doesn't matter. Just make yourself irreplaceable. 4th, reduce debt. Seriously. Credit card debt, student loans, car payments, all that stuff is an anchor around your neck. The less debt you have, the more freedom you have when things get dicey. 5. Stay flexible. Don't lock yourself into long-term commitments you can't get out of. The economy's changing fast. You got to be able to adapt.
And 6. Build a community. When the system's shaky, people who look out for each other survive. Family, friends, neighbors. Build those connections now. Now, I'm not saying to go full doomsday prepper mode, but being aware, being prepared, and being smart, that's just common sense. Because here's the bottom line. The economy might not collapse tomorrow, but it's not getting better anytime soon either. We're in for a long, bumpy ride, and the people who make it through are the ones who see it coming and prepare. The folks who wait around hoping things go back to normal, they're going to get hit the hardest. So take this as a wake-up call. The game's rigged, but now you know how it works, and knowing is half the battle. Before we wrap up, there's one final thing you need to know. Here's the final twist. The economy hasn't collapsed yet, but it's already collapsed for millions of Americans. Think about it. If you're working 2 jobs and still can't afford rent, your economy's collapsed. If you're drowning in student debt with no way out, your economy's collapsed. If you're one medical emergency away from bankruptcy, your economy's collapsed. The big crash everyone's worried about? For a lot of people, it already happened. They're just living in the aftermath. See, the national numbers look okay on paper. GDP's up, stock market's fine, unemployment's low, but those numbers don't tell the full story. They don't show the single mom working 3 jobs. They don't show the college grad living in their parents' basement. They don't show the retirees who can't actually retire because their savings got wiped out. The economy's a tale of 2 worlds. For the wealthy, things are great. Record profits, booming investments, life's good. For everyone else, it's a grind. And that gap, it's getting wider every day. So when people ask, why hasn't the economy collapsed? The answer is, it depends on who you ask. For Wall Street, it hasn't. For Main Street, it's been collapsing for years. And that's the real crisis. Not some dramatic crash that happens overnight, but a slow, grinding erosion of opportunity, of security, of hope. And unless something changes, that's going to keep getting worse. So here's my final thought. The system's broken. We all know it, but it's not going to fix itself. Change comes from people who refuse to accept the status quo, people who learn, who adapt, who build something better. That's you. You watch this video. You're paying attention. You're asking questions. That's the first step. Now, take the next one. If this opened your eyes, all right, let's wrap this up. Here's what we covered today. 1. The U.S. dollar's global dominance is the main reason the economy's still standing. As long as the world needs dollars, America can keep printing money and racking up debt. 2. The government's debt game is a shell game. They're borrowing to pay off old debt with new debt, and the Fed's buying it with money created out of thin air. 3. The whole thing runs on confidence, and that confidence is cracking. Once it breaks, everything falls apart. And 4. For millions of Americans, the collapse already happened. They're just living in it. So what now? Well, if you found this video valuable, do me a favor. Hit that like button. It helps more people find this stuff. And if you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe. We're breaking down the real economics behind the headlines. No BS, just facts. Drop a comment below and let me know. Do you think the economy is going to hold together, or are we headed for a crash? I want to hear your thoughts. And hey, if you really want to dive deeper into this stuff, we've got more coming. In fact, if you learned something today, you gotta check out our video, Here's How the Most Viral, Shocking Truth About America's Economy Was Hidden. It's popping up on your screen right now.